Hi, welcome to the Diablo podcast. We are online once again from DiabloInkGamers.com. This is two podcasts in a row, 2 days in a row, because there's just that much to talk about. Yesterday was Auction House, and today we're doing all of the new stuff about new data mining on character skills mainly, and a little bit of general game stuff, and mostly all 5 characters. Well, maybe 4, because the Witch Doctor is being unchanged because he's perfect as it is. And I'm your host, Flux. I'm joined again by Rankil,
Greetings.
who has gotten sick of the console already,
Getting there.
and by Wolfpaq, who is returning after a long voyage and a happy, fun quest with the Panda King.
Hello.
And how's World of Warcraft treating you? Have you got a new Sparkle Pony lately?
I have not played World of Warcraft for like 6 years.
And then what is your excuse? Actually, I thought you hadn't been on the podcast for like 6 years, but I checked and you were on in May. You and Nineball were on talking about something, so it hasn't been that
Yeah, that's
long,
not that long.
but you've been doing other things for a while.
Yeah,
You've been following Diablo though?
I have. I've been closely following it, and then when the expansion announcements happened, I decided, all right, it's time to start following it a lot more closely than I have been. So that's pretty much it.
Have you been in mourning over Jay Wilson's departure?
No,
That wasn't it? That wasn't
that,
the straw that broke the camel back?
no. I just, I play this game just like I do D2. I take lots of breaks, but when there's a reason to come back, I come back,
And here you are.
and here I am.
So anyway, we've had lots of data mining details and information, and should we just go alphabetically, or do you guys want to leap? I guess we might as well, because the Barbarian's got the most stuff to talk about.
Yeah.
Yeah, might as well.
So are either of you guys big-time Barbarian players, and are you horrified and heartbroken by the changes?
I mean, I had a kind of had a barbarian that was actually the last class that I leveled up and the last class that I had cleared Inferno with, but it
That
was
sounds like a no. That's like I hear a slow building
well,
no.
I did it because I knew they were overpowered, but then once when Paragon's levels came out, then I actually pretty much I switched back to softcore at that time because I was playing hardcore, and I just was straight Paragon leveling and spinning to win, and it was, I mean, because it was really the build to do. It was actually the only build really to do. I mean, so I mean, as far as other stuff now, though, I think it's still that barbs are grossly overpowered. They're the easiest class to build up to. They require the least amount of like kind of specific gear, or at least everything kind of works together for them. I mean, they have really good synergies with passives and skills. I mean, they were just designed to work really well, whereas every other class is a bunch of holes.
Yeah, the podcast I did last weekend about the console was one that you were not on. You were in the previous podcast on the console, and both guys had a barb for their main and were just charging along. They were like, well, yeah, because the barb's the easiest. Of course we did a barb.
Yeah, I'm
So
actually doing I'm playing with like my girlfriend and my friend for a local co-op, and I picked the Barb for it, and it's ridiculous. I mean, I'm just running up, and they're always getting yanked to me and teleported to me because I'm just sprinting ahead and rending everything and one shot rending stuff and running off the screen, and it's like I don't even have Whirlwind yet, and they keep complaining that all the drops are strength drops for me, and I just keep getting stronger and stronger. So
well, Jay Wilson's favorite class was the barbs, and it shows.
yeah.
So what's your barb experience, Wolfpack?
I took one to level 60 and then I just wasn't interested, so I stopped playing him basically. I mean, I tried to outfit him and I was able to do, I mean, it was pretty easy to get a gear set together that would let you become like brokenly powerful, and that just isn't interesting to me, so I stopped.
So it sounds like neither of you guys are too heartbroken by the impending nerfs, which are Legion.
No.
No, not really. I think it was kind of a long thing coming, and I mean, really, barbarians were just one dimensional.
Yeah, so we should mention what they've actually changed. I mean, the big ones immediately are the passives. The Barb had like the two. Would you say they were the two best passives in the entire game, or certainly amongst them, with Ruthless and Weapons Master?
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
it was kind of like the required, basically. I mean, you pick those two, and that was it. I mean, as long as at least you were in softcore. Like the only time you went away from those two passives was when you were in hardcore and you wanted to be somewhat defensive.
And then you just use one of them. But
Yeah, pretty much.
if you looked at the most popular Barb lists, those were usually like over 85% use rate for every single Barbarian. Every 85% of Barbs used both of those. And I think that includes like level 1 Barbarians that actually couldn't use both of those because they were too tiny yet. So it was pretty stupid not to.
Yeah,
And Ruthless used to be 5% critical hit chance and 50% critical hit damage just forever. And now it is
it's
40% additional damage to enemies below 30% health, which is pretty interesting in a way, but obviously
it's
nowhere near
basically
as powerful.
execute.
The Weapons Master was a bonus damage to bonus effects for different kinds of weapons you were using, and that's still the same thing, but the numbers are a little lower on the
Yeah.
ones that no one, on the good ones. Pole arms are still the same because no one ever uses pole arms
Well,
anyway.
and
But
that was kind of a thing is like, I mean, like polearms and spears were something where you potentially could have had something that's good. I don't know. I mean, based off of these numbers and them cutting them in half, I mean, maybe they're aligned with each other as far as the damage, but just like ruthlessness, it was having critical hit chance or just straight up a damage increase was pretty much always better than the attack speed increase that you could get. And it was always kind of like why did they even, did they really look at the numbers on this? So, I mean, this
Yeah.
is kind of like a balance thing that they finally got to, but
And I feel like some of these changes we should really look at in the terms of all the classes because the Demon Hunter has a very similar passive called Archery that also got
mhm.
changes made to it, and so it's not like
Weirdly changed. Yeah, we'll get to that in
yeah,
Demon Hunter.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, I know, but I'm just saying it's not. I don't think the Barbarian specifically was targeted. I think that this is part to do with the whole like weapon DPS like tripling from now to level 70. So
Yeah.
they maybe are running some numbers up there and decided, you know what, we need to change this.
It's kind of like the same thing I mean, it's the same company, but it's going, I hate making the WoW references because, but it's inevitable with them being the same company. But going from original WoW to the Burning Crusade, there was a big issue because all of the gear in the classic WoW had straight up, you got 1% crit or 2% crit on a piece of armor. But, when you were a level 60 character, you were up to like 40% critical hit chance. At least I was on my rogue. And I was sitting there thinking about it, and I'm like, man, these are just straight up percent damages. It scales. It scales with your gear. So then I was wondering how in the expansion, how are they going to increase, and you'd end up having 60% crit. But then they changed everything to like it was a critical hit rating type thing, and that scaled based off of your level. But I see they haven't done anything to this, but it's, they're really only doing the 10 levels. So, but that might even be, I don't know when we'll talk about that too, but there's the whole gear reductions and the life steals, and it seems like a lot of stuff they're reducing and taking it off of gear almost in a way. So we'll see.
Yeah, generally across the board, almost all the classes lost everything that is lifesteal, or else it was way turned down. That's a big thing the Demon Hunter suffers as well.
Right.
Yeah,
And people are kind of assuming they're not going to have lifesteal on the new higher level weapons. The level 64 to 70 weapons aren't going to have lifesteal. So that's probably a change in the whole game in general.
Yeah, or even they might even do what they did with attack speed, and just say, you know what, no one has life steal anymore, and just take it off, replace it with life on hit.
Well, the Barb sure doesn't because the other big passive nerf is Bloodthirst, which was a free 3% lifesteal, which again
hmm
every other class would have killed for. The monk certainly would have,
Yeah,
and that's no longer lifesteal now.
yeah, and I feel like some of these changes too, in addition to being part of overall changes, are things that we've known has been coming for a while. Like, or maybe not lifesteal specifically, but with the Wrath of the Berserker change, they've said, they don't want Archon form, they don't want Wrath of the Berserker to last forever because they're supposed to be,
But I
temporary
always found it
boosts.
interesting because they said that they wanted Archon to go away, and then they added the assist kills to it, which basically made it, if you played in a group play, to make it permanent. That was
Right.
always kind of a funny thing.
Yeah. Yeah. It was clearly a longer term thing that they had in mind with that for sure.
Yeah,
Well, they were stuck between the whole balancing this skill and boosting multiplayer, and obviously boosting multiplayer won out at that point.
Yeah.
yeah.
And so, do you guys know there's a lot of important new acronyms coming up in ROS, which I continue to think is called Realm of Secrets, which is probably not correct. Do you know what LFFS stands for and HGHB? Because you're going to have to learn them.
Well, I think life for fury spent per fury spent, and then
Yeah, that's like half the Barb skills have that.
yeah. Well,
And the other one is Health Globe Healing Bonus, which is also what a lot of Barb skills have.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's even not even just barbs. It seems like a lot of. I mean, I don't have a list of them off the top of my head, but I mean, there were a lot of them that had that.
Monks and witch doctors got it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's kind of interesting because, if it is this life steal is getting taken away, and you're going to be getting, pretty much what it's going to be is you need to generate as much resources and spend them as quickly as you can, basically, and it's even a lot of other stuff too. Like, I mean, I'm kind of jumping ahead on the Barbarian, but was for Into the Fray. They took away the whole on crits, you're getting Fury, and that was, single-handedly
That,
alone, pretty
but
much.
that was his Infinite Fury skill, and
Yeah,
now it's
Yeah.
I
gone.
mean,
It's
really,
totally
that
changed.
was the one skill that broke barbarians, I think, in my mind. I mean, it was because by having that, they were able to have infinite fury, and then they were able to, not have a fury generator, and then they were just going through and and it's, I mean, everything just multiplied basically off that. I mean, almost if they went through and just changed that, it would have pretty much broke Whirlwind, and they wouldn't be able to do it at least as crazy as they do now. But
Yeah, I thought the healing stuff. I mean, the Barb was obviously very overpowered on lifesteal, but I thought a lot of that was because he was so overpowered on DPS, and a lot of that was because he had infinite fury.
well, I'm
Well, and
surprised they
So
didn't
it
change
seems that
Revenge
yeah,
though. Like,
I thought they could have just fixed one of those things, and that like if they'd fixed the infinite fury or the DPS, that would have fixed the lifesteal by itself. But obviously, lifesteal is a bigger issue. So it seems like Barbs are getting hit by all like everything that's kind of a major game change that's being changed on the whole. The Barbs had the most of, So that's why it seems like it's
well,
the worst
yeah,
thing.
that's probably why they were by far the number one class in the game, right? Like by far the fastest Paragon leveler, by far the fastest PvE farmer, by far the fastest Uber skiller. They had the best of all the worlds, and Blizzard said, you know what? They probably shouldn't be the number one. I mean, I've played a lot of games over the course of the past 15 years or so. I've never seen an imbalance this bad favoring one class over the rest.
But the other kind of ongoing point here is that the Paragon system, the new Paragon points, you can add big bonuses to your CC and your CD and your IS and your main stat. And so, in a way, they had to nerf barbs just to have them running in place because you're going to have 10% more CC and 50% more CD, and like that just makes up for what they turned off on Weapons Master almost. Or sorry, the other one, Ruthless.
Right. Yeah, it's
But
very
of course,
true.
every other class gets that too. So I mean, in some ways, they had to kind of nerf them a little bit to keep them in place. But obviously, on the whole, can you think of any barb builds that are improved? I mean, maybe there'll be new builds found, but
well, the thing is just when you're taking away. I mean, the one thing that was interesting was, gosh, it was a weapons throw is now a fury generator, so you don't have to actually
yeah.
worry about gearing. So you're going to kind of, I mean, I don't know what it's going to do, but it looks to me like because you don't have into the fray though, really, that's going to go back to people using a generator. Until there's at least something else they can find where you can go through and replace a generator. But as far as I know, there's nothing. I mean, because the only thing that I could think of would be using the Warcry with the charge rune, which ended up giving you like a bunch of fury. But even then, they nerfed that back to do about half the fury that it gave you.
Yeah, I can't think of a bar build that got improved by these changes. But I mean, we have,
I guess Ancient Spear and War and Weapons Throw are the only thing you can kind of do something new with.
yeah, but I mean, we haven't seen a lot. Like we're working off an incomplete
Yeah.
list of really, really early changes, and we know from, the initial development of the game how quickly that stuff can change. And I'm really hoping that um, a lot of the new builds that come out of the expansion are based on the new gear that we're able to get. And so maybe there's going to be a barbarian axe or, a barbarian belt that really changes the way you can do stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, there might be something that gives you, you have an item that's whenever you crit, you gain fury back, or
right.
something like that, and it's going to be on that item, so that's what you're specifically looking for. But I saw a guy who put up on the internet, he put it was a video of him doing a whirlwind build that used skills and runes that were working, with this that didn't generate or whatever. And I think he said still, I mean, he was still only able to get like 100 million experience per hour, which is nothing compared to what you can do now. But he was still showing that you can still do basically a whirlwind build that will still work, which actually was interesting because like how they changed Hurricane, because out of all the nerfs that they did for, it seems like every ability for the whirlwind build they changed. But Hurricane, instead of moving at your movement speed, now it pulls enemies from 45 yards away, which is just, I mean, if you're thinking about it, you more or less can, I mean, because really what you used Whirlwind 4 was for clipping, so you clip through mobs, and you didn't necessarily have to have Whirlwind on all the time. It's just that it was so easy when you had infinite resources. So now people are, you pretty much could use Hurricane to pull enemies into you, and then use an ability to, like Rend or something else to do all the damage to them. So I think you'll still see a Whirlwind build, but it just won't be the same Whirlwind build that we have today of, permanent Super Saiyan and spin to win,
Right,
basically.
right. Yeah. Hopefully not leagues ahead of everyone else in terms of what
Yeah.
you can accomplish with it.
Yeah, they did add one passive or one thing that gives you CC immunity now because obviously you can't have that with Wrath of the Berserker anymore because you can't. Well, you have it, just not for very long. You have
Yeah.
about 15 seconds now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I also think that since we're getting cooldown reduction as an affix now, that
Yeah.
even I mean, we're probably not going to be able to obviously you're not going to be able to have it up permanently, but you're not going to need to wait the full 2 minutes if you take the time and get the gear so you don't have to wait the 2 minutes.
Yeah, I mean,
And
even if
maybe,
you can get like half, a 50% reduction on cooldown, having it 60 seconds is pretty darn good. I mean, that's
yeah,
almost
Yeah,
to the point where like,
that's every boss back.
yeah, in early Inferno, the most overpowered ability they had, which was Revenge,
right.
and they didn't change the fact that it gives, a percent of maximum life per enemy hit. And I mean, that alone was the one ability that made Barbs able to go into Inferno with practically even, barely any life on hit
Yeah,
and be able to
and
keep
no
themselves alive.
resists.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, yeah, and all they did is they went with all their defensive passives. They wanted everything to be attacking them, and when everything was attacking them, they were just staying alive. So, if the game is still difficult, I mean, especially with this sword and board passive, which gives them, blocking attack generates 20 fury. And then there's even the other one, the rampage, increases strength by 4% for 8 seconds after killing or assisting, which is where the Archon change basically came in. And then, so it's like pretty much as they go through, they're going to have like all of this huge buff, and you can get a lot of less damage taken because it seems like with going away from these lifesteal abilities, they're going to make this focus on having more EHP because especially too that they're having that the toughness, I think it is they call it now, which is basically an EHP calculation. They do it for you. So I mean, my speculation is that they're trying to make it more difficult and make classes need to go more defensive. I think Wyatt was talking in, I don't know which interview it was because I don't know if it was in yours or if it was in one of the other fan site interviews, but he was
There were
talking.
no others. It was only mine.
But he was talking about the the different play styles of what they have, and it's like, well, if you end up just making the monsters doing twice as much damage, everyone just goes super defensive, or if you make everything super weak, then everybody just goes glass cannony. So it's like they're trying to get this balance.
The Barb, I think, previously had 6 passives that were better than anything the Monk had, and now 3 of them have been nerfed, but there's still other, like, Brawler is really good. I mean, Brawler is what, 30% weapon, 30% damage increase if you have 3 enemies within 8 yards, which nobody uses now because why would you with other stuff? But in the
No,
future, that could be
you
fantastic in a
used it
crowd.
for whirlwind builds because I know a lot of guys. I at least I did. I used it because you were always surrounded by guys, so you basically had a straight up. It was actually almost a better buff sometimes than Weapon Master or Ruthless if you had enough crit on your gear. So,
And I imagine that will become much more popular now, and of course the
oh
Monk
yeah,
would kill for that. Monk, I would trade all 3 of my Monk's passives for
oh
that,
I
but then
know.
again. Moving on, Demon Hunter. You were a big Demon Hunter fan, Wolfpaq. Why don't you give us a quick overview and what you think is changing and improving or needs fixing?
Um, well, it looks like they've recognized that very few hatred spenders are worth taking. And so I mean, that was the major thing I took away from reading the changes is they buffed the heck out of things like multi-shot and strafe and cluster
Like
grenades.
like everything.
Yeah, everything, yeah, almost everything that caused hatred, except for the most popular one, got buffed. So that was pretty good. But then obviously we got hit with the same nerf that Barb's got. Our uh, our shadow powered gloom got 10% of the damage reduction taken off, and then the life leech, of course, went away. So I'm honestly, I don't understand the nerf at all to preparation because discipline is
which
already,
which is it only gives you 30
yeah,
discipline now instead of filling
instead
it.
of filling it, which is huge. I mean, it's a massive nerf because almost every demon hunter has more than 30 discipline. So yeah, I don't understand that change because it's already by far the hardest resource in the game to keep up. We don't have, I mean, everyone. So we were just talking about knights, about passives and how there's very little variety when you're choosing which passive to use, and every single demon hunter takes Night Stalker, the one that when you crit you get discipline because it is such a difficult. I mean, you get 1 discipline per second. I don't think any other resource in the game has that kind of like limitation on it without another way to generate it back more quickly, and then Night Stalker, and that's pretty much it. And I mean that's why Legacy Natalia's was so popular back when it was out. Everyone wanted to get it, and even after it became like substandard gear, a lot of people still use it because discipline is such a requirement for demon hunters for farming. So anyways, I don't understand what they're doing with that nerf to preparation, and I don't know what their plan is for demon hunters surviving, because one of the big reasons I think that demon hunters are the worst class in the game for farming the higher MPs is we're one of the few that you can't just stand there and take it. You have to, when you get to elites, you have to start kiting, and unless you have like some of the best, like most outrageously good gear in the game, but there aren't that many demon hunters farming MP10 right now compared to the other classes.
I was
So
actually thinking about this. What if, I mean, I don't know if it's necessarily they would pull this from there because it's kind of a an internal thing, but you know how all the melee guys got the 30% automatic damage reduction? What
yeah,
if they remove that? So all of the range classes now are on par with melee classes, basically.
yeah, that would
I'm
be a
wondering if
huge
they do
help.
that. Because
You
that
know,
would make sense why they would remove, because pretty much gloom was, it needed to be on permanently for you to survive.
yep,
So um yeah, and I mean maybe they're going through, because that was a big complaint. I mean, you look at the the PvP, the brawling changes that they did, where I think every range class got a 25% damage reduction, I think it was, and then they kept the melee classes, or no, the range classes got 30%, but then the melee classes got bumped up to 35%. So maybe it's something along the same lines of that, where they're kind of realizing that maybe this giving, because that was another thing that made monks and barbarians so strong, was that they had a passive 30% damage reduction just flat out by being a melee class.
right. That's very true.
We were debating the new before the data mining came out. We were debating the new level 61 to 70 skills the characters could get and what they need to be changed and fixed, and not just changing current stuff, but there were a lot of people. I mean, my main objection with the Demon Hunter is that it's too fragile. It's too easy to die. Make one mistake and die forever in hardcore. So I really wanted a death cheating passive, but they don't seem to want to do that. However, there's a lot of equipment now. The procs on some of the new legendaries. There's like 4 different ones that would serve that for function. So maybe Demon Hunters can get away with that.
Yeah, there was that. Wasn't there that one where it was like if you die, it consumes the item basically and brings
Yeah,
you
and
back to life?
there's like three other ones too
Yeah.
that are all. But the other thing is that the burst damage. I mean, Demon Hunters seem like they're pretty good against trash mobs, but you don't have that huge burst damage that almost every other class has, and you have to kite, and that just makes it so much slower to deal with elites. And they don't seem like there's any of the skills that are really fixing that. There's one that's kind of sort of aiming at that, but
Yeah, I don't
like you
know.
were just saying, Wolfpaq, you have to kite. That just makes such a difference in having to retreat and move around as opposed to just standing there and pounding stuff with a monk or a barb.
Well, I
Right.
mean, pretty much on any MP10 Demon Hunter that I've seen, running a build, they're running a Calamity just to get, the fastest attack speed that they can so they can get the most crits to have, in effect, an infinite discipline. They cast Gloom to stay up there with the lifesteal, and then they just usually well, they'd first pop up the Gloom and then they'd snapshot the rapid fire and then just do bombardment and then just do that. They just stand there with bombardment. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, because that's really like the only MP10 build that's out there that I've seen that at least
Yep.
is effective for a demon hunter. So
I mean, it just seems wrong, though. I mean, that's not what an archer should be doing, it seems like. Even though my complaint was just that you have to kite, it's like when you don't kite, well, that seems cheesy. So
well,
obviously,
it was
there's no
still even
pleasing
the
me.
same thing. I mean, when you're looking at item wise, with a barbarian, I mean, barbarian was able to get 12% lifesteal, from 6% from weapons, 3% from a belt, and 3 from a passive. So I mean, if they needed life, they got it. Demon hunters are probably the worst off because they could only get 3% on a main hand or 3% on a crossbow, and that was it. They couldn't get it. They didn't have a 6% two-handed weapon. The one that gives them the bonuses, whatever, they actually added in there. There's a two-handed crossbows in there.
Yeah, a second hand crossbow. So if you have 2 pistol crossbows as opposed to using a quiver.
Which no one does
Yeah,
because
Well, because quivers are so much better
quivers are
well,
now.
so
because
much better.
quivers give you 20% attack speed, which automatically is 5%, or up to 20%, which is automatically better than the 15% bonus they give you from running dual wielding in the first place. So
Yep.
it's kind of like, yeah, that's like another kind of like oversight of like what were they thinking when they put it in? They're just like, oh, this sounds great, and then it's kind of like they put it in, and someone, the intern came in the office and was just like, hey guys, I noticed this, and they're like, shut up, intern. They're like, go back to spell correcting our
Or emails.
tooltips, which are actually, yeah. Yeah.
One last thing on the Demon Hunter, Archery is by far the most popular passive, and we were just mentioning that, and that gives you currently you get a 15% damage bonus with a bow, you get a 50% critical hit damage bonus with a crossbow, and you get a 10% critical hit chance with a hand crossbow. And they've changed that. They've lowered the bow to 8% and the hand crossbow to 5%, but they have not changed the crossbow bonus. It's still 50%. And obviously this is, as you said earlier, these are temporary figures from early data mining. But that's really weird because 90% of demon hunters use a manticore because it's by far the biggest damage.
Right, the
Which
double
is actually,
And that's
socket.
in my opinion, I
and
think
that's
it's
a crossbow.
I actually think it's the worst weapon to use too, based off of the fact of the discipline generation. But
Especially given how popular two-handed crossbows are, like Flux was
yeah,
saying.
or even
Yeah,
in
that's
just
that's the weird thing.
crit
They
and crit
nerf
hit
the ones
damage.
that nobody uses now, and they didn't nerf the one that almost everybody uses. So I wonder what other changes, if there's going to be more, there's going to be better stuff with faster attack now, or maybe we're just going to get new legendary bows and one-handed crossbows that are much better than the
Yeah.
current ones. Did you have one last Demon Hunter thought there, Wolfpack? You were dying?
I hope that they bring back dual wielding one-handed crossbows because that's like,
I agree.
they have so many images of the demon.
But how do you reload?
There was
But you have one in
no.
each hand. How do you
It's
make more
it's
bullets?
funny on the console. There's one of the tooltips or whatever that it says when you're on the loading screens, and it says something that like the crossbows that they have are wielding with magical powers or whatever it is that they're crafted or something along the lines. So
That's
like
right.
that's how they
So then
explain it.
what's in the quiver?
Yeah, the quivers just stand there. It feeds through their veins, and then it goes into the I don't know
Now let's go.
the new passives and skills that they have. I mean, it's this shadow wall, which to me is like it's zombie wall, but a shadow wall, but then has some sort of like weird. It's kind of like either the guys go through the wall or they don't go through the wall, or you go through the wall type thing. So it's a weird. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how it is, but it might be something that benefits the class being, a very kite class, but it is, I mean, it'll be a wall, so it keeps the guys stuck there. So for all of these abilities that make where you need to stand still, we were talking about, it's kind of, I
Yeah.
mean, there's even other ones that are like, as you're standing still, you're gaining more movement speed or like dodge or some other stuff, and or whatever it is. It's like there's kind of these things that the Demon Hunter has where it's like, if you're standing still, you're going to get stronger or faster or something else like that, and then once you move, then
It goes away.
it's yeah.
Yeah, can two demon hunters make a corner with two walls and the monsters will just stand there forever? So the monk I think had the monk and the witch doctor had by far the fewest changes listed, and that's because they're perfect as they are apparently.
Yeah.
There's almost no changes at all to the monk's passives, which is too bad because he needs some new passives and better
No,
passives.
near
There's
death
actually two cool
experience.
new
Near
passives.
death experience was huge, huge.
Well, they give you a little bonus with it, but
That's pretty big though. I mean,
the bonus is that you don't die when it goes off. I don't care what other bonuses I get on top of that.
well, it's kind of. I mean, just the interesting thing is because I mean, I guess it's more of a different play style, I guess, of it because when near death experience goes off as a monk, you go into the like put your hands over your head and give the signal and just wave around and be like, oh my gosh, don't kill me, let me get out of here. Whereas I think the new one, the fact it's just like getting extra health glow bonus, life per second, life per hit by 35%. It's kind of like if this goes off, you stand there and you're like, you know what, screw you guys, I'm going to start attacking you and like get back. Kind of a, it maybe it is just a way, but who knows? Maybe it doesn't work as well as it seems like it looks like on paper, and you're still just putting your hands up in the air and run around with the chicken with your head cut off. But
So anyway, the two new ones I like, Mythic Rhythm, which I'll kind of guarantee I will say Mystic Rhythm at least 10 times. Using a spirit generator grants increased spirit by 2, stacking up to 3 times, and it all goes away when you use a spirit spender. So if you just get there banging along, you can really build up spirit. So basically, you would drop like 3 bells and completely empty it, and then you would just do lightning fists or whatever for like 10 seconds, and it would really quickly fill back up again. I like that you can kind of go periodic bursts like that. I
which
like things that change the playstyle a
which
little.
Fist of Thunder also has permanent teleport on it now.
Yeah, and more stuff.
Which
Feel free to jump right ahead of what I'm saying,
yeah.
though. I don't want And momentum is the other one. The other one, in moving 30 yards, increases your damage by 20% for 4 seconds. So basically, you would just run up to each pack and have a big burst. Or I could see like during the fight, you'd see like you're killing off the trash mobs and the boss is coming closer. You would just either Tempest Rush across it or use the much improved Dashing Strike. And hey, I just went 30 yards, and now my damage has got 20% bonus for 4 seconds. Oh, I can do this again going back the other way in 4 more seconds,
Yeah, and that doesn't seem like a. I mean, I know they were talking about like, oh, once you see the changes we're doing with Dashing Strike and some other stuff or whatever, it's going to be really popular because now you're going to have, you know, if you have that dashing strike, was it over 30 yards? That was the movement where it refunds the cost of it.
Or
I think
So
it's
25.
25.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. That's
so
with an item though, right?
yeah, but it's again, a lot of these changes they look, some of them look crazy or good or whatever, but we also don't know a lot of the affix changes on things or gear or things like that. So, combining something like that, you pretty much just are like, oh, okay, I'm gonna teleport away from the pack and then, or dashing strike away and dashing strike back into the pack, and now you do 20% more damage, and it didn't cost you any spirit to go out and back into the pack. So,
Out and back into the pack. Sounds like the lyrics from an Australian song. So Fists of Thunder is another interesting change. That's probably the most popular, or at least one of the most popular monk skills. And it's like it's gotten a big. I'm trying to get a debate going that in the forum thread we had about this. If it's actually a buff or a nerf. I mean, it's a big buff on the damage percentage. It went from 110 to 145% weapon damage at the base. But now the third hit deals 275% weapon damage as lightning between all enemies in front of you. That's not per enemy, that's all enemies. So if you hit 10 enemies, that's doing 27.5% each.
yeah,
However, that sounds like it'd be awesome against bosses or just 2 or 3 or 4 monsters.
yeah.
Plus, you get a little chain lightning of proc as well on top of that. But it seems like they're trying to make this Fists of Thunder not be something like if you're using it, in the Dogger Oasis or something, and you get 57 snakes surrounding you, it's going to be less effective. But it's going to be fantastic against individual monsters or just 1 or 2 or 3.
The generator spender mentality. I mean, it's basically you run around with Fists of Thunder, you just auto attack basically, and then once your spirit's full, you just dump it on a champ pack. I mean, trash really just dies from your cyclones, so it's kind of like they're still very one dimensional kind of in a way, with which I was even more surprised to not really see, because I don't think there was really much changes for sweeping wind. I'm more surprised at that because sweeping wind is another pretty much mandatory skill to have. Like that's one of the things that is always on your bar.
I'm glad that they're finally making everything that they can do that restores health and heals and everything scale off of the life off of health globes, because it was kind of silly before. My buddy was complaining because he had a monk with 50,000 hit points, and then his heal was like, I don't know, 6 to 8K, when he's casting it, and that seems kind of silly.
This is also like a first, PTR as well. So it's
Right,
kind of like
right.
they're going down the list, and
And I'm hoping I mean, there really should be more
yeah,
because
oh
you
yeah,
want it to be different. And I mean, going back to earlier, you guys were talking about how dashing strike would work. It strikes me that it would be a skill that's pretty worthless when used against bosses. And I think that from a lot of the changes that we're seeing, Blizzard seems like they're going in a direction where they kind of really want you to think about whether your character is going to have AoE capacity or single target capacity, because right now for monks, from what I understand from the ones that run with what's it called again, the sweeping wind, and
yeah, the sweeping wind
um,
cyclone.
like all the damage they do is AoE. Their Fist of Thunder is AoE. Their Sweeping Wind is AoE. When they drop bells, it hits everything in a circle, and so there's no trade-off. Like, I'm going to do high single target damage, and so then I guess Dashing Strike sounds like it's going to be incredible, especially once you get that unique that refunds the spirit cost, or legendary that refunds the spirit cost. But then when you get to a really high hit point boss that you need to kill, suddenly it loses its power. And I hope that this is a trend that we're seeing where you need to, you want to make sure you bring a high source of single target, and you want to make sure you have a high source of AoE, and you don't just have one build that works perfectly for everything, and none of the skills are like single target based.
Well, and
Um,
like you said with the monk too, is the heavy focus on AoE. That change basically, came to the focus was because of the monster density increases. Really, I mean, once everything came to the point where like you couldn't move, anywhere without seeing a monster. It's
right.
like there was, I think it was even the first thing, a video of Jay Wilson where he was talking about like, well, what should you do for a character class and how should you build them? He's like, you really need to still have a single target spell. You need to have an AoE ability. You need to have a defensive ability. Like
Right.
they wanted the game built around picking from different categories instead of just go for every single damage ability that you have that attacks everything on screen. I mean, it's fun killing stuff on screen, but like going back to the original Inferno, which is their kind of original intent, it was very much a single target focus, like try and single pull guys and pull guys from groups. And I mean, they're talking about it being harder, so I don't know necessarily
Yeah.
it'll make it the same difficulty as original Inferno, but like you're saying, I mean, it's hopefully it goes to something where you have to have those wide range of skills, and that helps to give you build diversity.
Right. I mean, like you said, I remember an interview with, I think it was Jay Wilson, where they're like, "What's one thing that you would suggest for people going into Inferno?" And he's like, "Oh, well, make sure you bring a very strong single target damage skill." And
Yeah,
now,
And Jay strikes again.
now if you watch any class farm, MP10, like they're not bringing a strong single target skill. Everything's AoE.
That was one of the things I asked Wyatt and what's his face, the other guy, Josh, when I interviewed him. Is there any way to make single target skills viable in a game where there's always 50 enemies on the screen? And they basically said wait for loot runs.
Huh.
So they're gonna try to break up the monotony. The style of the play is going to be changed in that, in theory, where you have single targets. Instead of just trying to change the skills, if you change how the game works, and you can make different skills more viable for different things.
and
That's
since it
good.
is random too, it could change the densities, for each one. So some of them you get a single target, and you kind of get to the beginning, and you maybe attack the trash in the first room, and you're like, oh, this is a super dense room. I'll go AOE, and then the next one you do, it's like it's very sparse but heavy hitting, high hit point guys, and you're like, oh, I'm gonna go to my single target build or so.
I just hope they keep in mind that the reason everyone's focused on AoE so heavily is because that's by far the most efficient way to gain Paragon level XP is to kill. In fact, I don't know if it still happens, but I know that for a long time, I've read threads for lots of classes where they're like their advice is ignore the elites, run around in monster power 10, kill the huge packs of monsters, and just ignore the elites because the XP bonus is so high, and even the base monsters in MP10 are giving you so much XP that it's a better thing to farm than if you were in MP5 and you were actually taking the time to kill the elites. And I feel like
Yeah,
that's
that
a
that really
discrepancy they
hasn't
should
changed.
fix.
The only difference was in the last patch, because the Nephilim Valor like multiplied. Now you get 5 stacks and then ignore the elites and kill all the trash.
So they didn't add any real different changes to the monk. One of the things that I had kind of hoped for was maybe they would make some of the auras, which I guess are called mantras. That's very, very different. They were going to make them a little better or a little different, or make them seem more of a multiplayer boosting thing. Like something like aura, mantra of retribution is fantastically effective, but it increases the damage monsters take instead of boosting the damage you do, which is basically the only change from that from some of the paladin auras. And of course, if it boosted the stuff you did, everybody would look at their character, have a little glowing thing under their feet, and notice that their DPS display was 25% higher. Be like, oh, this is awesome, this is so cool. But you don't see that because it's sort of a hidden. You see it in your critical hit numbers on the monsters, but you don't see it in the game.
Yeah.
And I had hoped that you maybe would do some buffs to that. However, the new character is the Crusader, who is all about Paladin 2.0.
Right.
Yeah.
So it seems like any possibility of increasing the mantras went out the window when the Crusader
Well,
became
and
the new dude.
the thing with the mantras as well is they still kept the durations on them, whereas I'm playing a hardcore monk now on the console, and they don't have durations on the mantras. Really, really wanted to see something that was changing with Sweeping Wind. Something that pulled away Sweeping Wind that didn't make it necessarily a requirement.
Like I said before, I really think that monks and witch doctors have a lot more changes coming, and that this was just an initial pass, or at least that's what I'm hoping. But 6 months from now, we'll all be saying, "Don't we? We wish."
Anyway, Witch Doctor. Speaking of the other character that didn't have a whole lot of changes
Yeah.
made,
I think the only one that I saw was Firebats no longer has a channeling cost, which is interesting. That was for the vampiric bats because they took away the lifesteal. There's really not much. I mean, they have kind of like the new abilities for him, the Carrion Swarm, which to me seems like it's a ranged Locust Swarm basically, which was kind of a complaint that I had with Locust Swarm was that I'd always kind of you do the sneeze on the guys that was right next to you, but a lot of times I would always airball the sneeze pretty much, and like just barely it would go to the left or right of the enemy that I wanted to hit. New passives, which were kind of, I mean, your Haunt and Locust Swarm abilities last almost forever, which I don't understand. I mean, almost forever is saying it's like, well, is that just doubling the duration, or is it tripling, quadrupling, or is it?
almost forever is more than quadrupling.
Yeah,
I wonder maybe they'll linger longer on the corpses. Yeah, there's no depth. Yeah, obviously that's a tooltip that's in progress.
yeah,
Yeah.
but the
But I really enjoy Locust Swarm. I mean, eventually you can't
oh,
use it. It
it's
doesn't do enough damage to
well,
keep
and
up at
and
high
that's the
levels.
thing is if you get like say you run that ability with Locust Swarm and Pestilence and you want it to get to every guy on the screen. Really, I mean, actually, really, even you don't even need Pestilence at that point because if it lasts almost forever and you can cast it. It can linger around long enough so it actually does infect everything in the room. So
The big thing that's going on in the thread, in the forum thread that I did for these, is people are debating endlessly if sacrifice works on all zombie dogs or only the ones you summon with summon zombie dogs. Because there's Circle of Life and some other skills have procs, and probably some items have procs that can give you additional zombie dogs for free, basically.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not even going to recount it now because I couldn't. You really have to read it yourself. It's like a perfect example of everything that people love and fear about single video game fan sites.
the way I read it, I'm reading this as a glass half full. That it's clarifying that you can't sacrifice, dogs that are in the middle, and like you need dogs in order to sacrifice them.
I believe you were playing a Witch Doctor on the console. You said that Plague of Toads is much faster, the movement speed of the frogs.
Oh yeah, those guys are like there was that, and I found out later too. Spirit Barrage moves a lot faster. I haven't really seen any other abilities or whatever that move at like a faster speed, but it seems like I mean, I still haven't gotten to the point because all of those useless abilities that nobody uses, but that was kind of like I just randomly put it on there and was like, oh, I'm going to use toads, and I'm like, holy crap, these guys are flying across the screen at lightning speed, pretty much.
So of course the question is that something we might see in the expansion? You
Yeah,
know,
and I mean,
just making things move faster can make them much more fun. I mean, there's like Arcane Orb on the Wizard we'll get to in a minute. Some of those say it moves faster or slower than it used to,
yeah, I
but
haven't
nothing else
actually.
specifies that. So imagine if, because I really like Plague of Toads, I like the idea of it. I mean, it's just charge bolt with amphibians. It's a cool concept,
Oh,
but they're so goddamn slow, you just can't use
it
it.
was hilarious in the beta. Like I was running with friends and we were doing 4 witch doctors with toads, and just the whole entire screen is filled with the fluorescent green toads, and it was glorious, but it was just terribly inefficient.
And they're all ribbity and stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah, I would love that. So I was hoping, obviously the Witch Doctor is the work in progress. There's, most of the skills, it's like no changes but tooltip wording,
yeah.
increase versus increases, that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of skills that don't really get used much. I mean, Wall of Zombies has a couple of changes made, but I mean, no one ever uses that. So
Yeah, I actually tried going through and getting a bunch of reduced cooldown stuff to make a zero wall build for that pylon rune. I've never actually really tried it as like a getting enough damage to it, but it's actually pretty because all of the old videos of them showing the zombie, the pylon rune was showing them casting it multiple times over again. So there used to be no cooldown on it, like it was bone wall, in D2. I don't know why they put a 20-second cooldown on it. That makes it pretty much worthless, but
So were you guys looking for anything new from Witch Doctors? I mean, the thing I was always kind of hoping, I wasn't a huge Necromancer fan, but I thought there should be some kind of Zoomancer, Zoo Doctor build where you could actually have lots and lots of things, like something like a better version of Circle of Life, where you would
um,
keep getting more and more mongrels or more shamans or more something, and eventually you get this huge pack of dudes like revives with a
like
Necromancer.
I
And there's nothing like that available now, but
yeah,
perhaps there
like
will be.
fetish psychopants. I always thought they're psychophants or whatever. I always thought that should have been something where the guys that you summon they don't die, but maybe that's an item that you get, where it's like whenever you summon your guys they won't
Yes,
die. So now,
fetish psychopants. That would be an awesome item,
yeah,
actually. I would totally wear that.
Well,
but
didn't they
they
make it so that every time they hit something, it reduces the cooldown for those
Yeah,
guys? Is that a
yeah, that's what.
change?
Well, but yeah, and that's the reduce, and that's the thing. So then you could run the passive for it, and then run the ability, and then summon
Yeah.
both. And you will have because I think you can get if you sit there and get like the machine gun darts. I think you can get the most was like 6 maybe of them from the passive.
Yeah.
Then the other guy, depending on the skill, so you can have up to maybe 12 guys on screen, and for every hit those guys are doing, but I think they attack once per second. They're up for 10 seconds. It
Well, then
almost
you get
seems like
the legendary that doubles their attack speed, and then
yeah,
you get bring out all your zombie dogs too, and it sounds
yeah,
like you'd be able to. I mean, I don't know
yeah.
how long they last, but it sounds like there'll be some support for having more
Yeah,
people
they
on the
last still
screen.
like a decent amount. It was because I used them in beginning of Inferno basically as just meat shields because the champ packs were so ridiculous for my witch doctor that I just summoned them and I'm like I want 12 things on screen right now so that the champs are not targeting me and they're targeting all of my little minions.
Right.
And yeah, so it definitely a pet class because that's what I played primarily in Diablo 2 was like a zoo necro, and everyone hated me because I lagged their computers and everything else. But um, yeah, I mean that, and I guess maybe more of like the spirit abilities because right now those really don't get used. Stuff like Spirit Barrage, is pretty. I know it's kind of popular with the PvP builds, but I haven't really. I've just looked at some of the PvP builds, but yeah, that's kind of that stuff. I wish zombie wall they would do something with it that you could block off, guys with the zombie wall and actually make it worthwhile. Maybe changing zombie charger runes to so that you're not just using zombie bears. There's a lot of stuff that there's only like one good rune or maybe a few good runes, but there's like a lot of unused runes, and it's just always that kind of like they need to do something to change around or buff the unused skills and runes.
Any last Witch Doctor thought for you, Wolfpack?
No, I think I said what I needed to.
Okay, so Wizard. Wizard. Lots of changes on the Wizard skills. It looks like they've at least worked on it. That, everything the Witch Doctor doesn't have, the Wizard does, basically.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, Wolfpack? Have you played a Wizard lately, and are you anticipating playing one with the new changes?
Yeah, that's what I've been doing since I came back to Diablo. I gave up on the Demon Hunter, and I've been playing a wizard, and it's been a ton of fun. I've really dug in and tested out a lot of things with the Wicked Wind critical mass builds. I really feel like, a lot of people are disappointed with build variety in Diablo 3, as they should be, but I feel like Wicked Wind or critical mass builds are an area where Blizzard got it right, and it makes me really happy to not see them changing that passive at all, because there is no one critical mass build. There's you know how many people run critical mass on the wizard. Almost everyone does, including Archon wizards, but there's so much variety. Like there's meteor critical mass, and there's three different Frost Nova runes that see a lot of play in wizards, which is, I mean, I've followed this game a lot. I don't think I've seen a skill in the game where there are three different runes that are commonly used other than Frost Nova. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's just incredible. And so yeah, I feel like the wizard has a lot of for improvement, and I really like the changes that they've listed. And I feel like the wizard is a good time to talk about how the changes they're making. They're finally adding elemental effects, which is something they were promising us, when Diablo 3 was just about to come out, and then they're like, oh no, all elemental effects are or they're going to be exactly the same. They're no
Yeah,
different.
there's different colors of the same thing.
Yeah, but yeah, now that every element's going to be doing something different, and be able to do more damage with that element, which I think will open up a lot of possibilities for elemental wizards.
The critical mass, the passive works really well, but I still think that like the perma stun thing is kind of that, that's that one breaks the game, because if you're standing there and nobody can even attack you and move, it kind of defeats the whole difficulty part of it, And I've seen some other people do just as kind of like a gimmick build. They run the same critical mass wizard build, but they don't run Frost Nova. They run with they put meteor or something else or whatever
Yeah.
in the place of it, and it's really interesting, and the builds still work, and but it's just that like the one thing that I'm kind of looking at is that you really only had critical mass of the multiple variations that they had for it, or Archon, or of course in the beginning you had like Blizzard Hydra, which is still kind of viable, I guess.
Yeah.
But
People using Sleet Storm now that it got buffed too.
yeah, but still the majority of it is either CM or Archon, and with Archon getting thrown away because that's not going to be permanent anymore. That pretty much leaves, because nothing really looked like it changed unless they change, because I haven't seen anything on proc coefficients, so I don't know how they're working, with that. So maybe
Right.
it might get a change with there, but I still think that really the only thing that for them to take away is the permanent the freezing from it. But I like everything else about the abilities for it, with maybe something still with that kind of infinite resource though. That's kind of the same thing that the Barb had. It's like if you it's cool when you can do it, when you can replace a generator with a spell and ability, and you don't need a generator anymore. But I think almost that should be, you should be able to do that only at a point when you have like near perfect abilities or gear or something else that like allows you to complement all that stuff together.
I don't know. I feel like Fury is different than Arcane Power.
Yeah.
Because the barb would cast Sprint, right? And then that would let off 4 or 5 different twisters, every single one of which was critting rapidly.
Yeah.
And and sprint took what, like 20% at most of the Barb's Fury pool versus um, Energy Twister costs a solid 1/3, and it's only one, and it sits in place. So you have to invest. I mean, yeah, once you get going, that's one thing
Yeah,
I've
it's that
noticed. That I've
that
been
wind
playing.
up or whatever.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's a serious wind up time where if I don't get 3 or 4 energy twisters down, which I have to cast manually in the span of a frost nova, I'm kind of in trouble. But if I do, then yeah, I'm getting back that resource and it's kind of awesome. And then the other thing is the heaviest hitting um, wizard skills have something of a delay to them, like meteor, right? You cast it, there's a second delay, and then the meteor hits, during which if the enemies aren't all in that tightly compacted area, then you just wasted a solid 60% of your resource pool. So I feel like for Wizard, there's a little bit more trade-off there than there is currently for the Barbarian. And I'm
Yeah.
not saying permanent. I'm not saying perma full arcane power is good, but I don't think there's quite the same. I mean, obviously, Wizards don't kill or farm as fast as Barbarians do, so it's not quite the same level of nerf necessity. But I see your point. It's
Wizard is getting some cool new skills, or old skills coming back, actually. Wave of
yes,
Force is basically turning into Nova now. They've
Yeah.
taken the cooldown away.
That's cool. I like that.
Frozen Orb is back as a rune effect on Arcane Orb, which sounds awesome. Glacial Spike is back as a rune effect on Magic Missile. Unfortunately, you still can't teleport around nonstop like a maniac, but
there's
I think everybody's
No,
pretty happy about the
there's hope.
Glacial
I mean, with
Spike.
CM builds, you can. I mean, you can get around. I've seen guys doing
Fault
the
of the Assassin.
yes, and I've seen them going through there, and do you basically kind of the same thing though. You need to do that wind up of casting, but like
Yeah,
they find a pack, they throw down 4 tornadoes or so on it, and then their teleports back up, and they zip zip zip. They find a champ pack, explode up the champ pack, it's dead. Then go to the next trash, and then it's just zip 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 zip. I mean, you can get around there if you have enough crit.
I'm really excited about the Wizard for this expansion because it's cool that elements like elemental differences are back and wizards are getting all sorts of ways to amplify elemental effects. How do you feel about that serpent wand that got so much discussion and then he changed his mind and was like, "Oh yeah, that's not going to be Hydras on death of monsters. It's going to be true Hydras." Is that going to be enough to make Hydra a build that wizards use?
I don't know. I mean, it's very good for low geared wizards. I mean, again, going back to you look at how the game when it started out, it was always Blizzard Hydra. I mean, and it was the same thing when I was leveling my hardcore wizards. It was Blizzard Hydra. That's all I leveled with. I mean, you really didn't have
Yeah,
any resource generations in order to use Arcane Orb or something else. It was just cast the Blizzard and cast the Hydra in the middle of it and run around and don't die.
Venom Hydra, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Super
exactly.
OP one. Yeah.
So,
I mean, Hydras were fantastic in Diablo 1 because you could just fill an entire room with them and then just watch.
yeah.
And D2, obviously, I think it was limited to what, 3 in D2? Or no, the time was a cooldown between them. I don't even remember anymore.
I think that was one of
Tragic.
those abilities where it was I don't know if it was for sure, but where it originally started out where there was no cooldown on it, and then they added those cooldowns to them because like Frozen Orb was one of them, Firewall I
Yeah.
think or something was one.
But you couldn't fill a room with Hydras in D2, obviously. So
No.
now you can at least do 2.
Yeah,
And they've just changed the way the skill works. I mean, it's like a turret, and it's really powerful, so you can only have one at a time. I kind of liked the first version they said, where it would have a chance to spawn from corpses, because I envisioned that being almost like a whirlwind barb kind of thing, where you would kill things, and as you were killing them, you get some hydras popping up, and you could just sort of run off to the next group while the last few hydras polished off the last few
yeah,
monsters.
because it's
And
kind of
now
the
it's
same
just
thing.
it's
It's
just
that
double
wind up.
hydras.
Well,
It
it's
isn't
like
as
a
much
yeah,
fun.
it's like a wind up though, where you went to the group, and it's not like you started out very strong. It's more that as you kept killing, the heads started popping up. But it's like, well, if you already killed 3/4 of the shit, and then the guys, excuse my French, but the guys like popped up from it. Um, they it's kind of like, well, the fight's almost already over, and you're overpowering the area of what it is. So really, I don't see it as being that overpowered.
Yeah, and it changes the gameplay a little bit. I mean, it just instead of just doubling your normal damage, it's giving you a big burst of damage. You get stronger as the monsters get weaker. That's kind of an interesting system there.
I
And it
just
would look
didn't.
badass.
It could have been really been fun against big elite groups too, where you get a whole bunch of those up, and then you finally, Yeah, you're doing keep two or something like that, and you have 50 skeletons and there's some boss in the middle of it, and it's like, okay, this is gonna be awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
finally get excited for the Horde thing, the Horde mod. But I wasn't excited about it because it would be
Because you're wrong.
worthless in a boss fight, right? You get to that boss at the end of the treasure run, and then you're like, well, good thing I'm going to be spawning Hydras. Not at all in this fight.
Well, that's the whole point in Diablo 3 Realm of Shadows, right? You're supposed to be some things are awesome for single targets, some things are awesome for groups, some things are awesome for nothing, and a lot of the nothing, unfortunately.
And it's the
But
thing
you
is
get a
Yeah,
variety,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's a skill that's fantastic for big groups and not so good for single targets, and that's the trade-off you take by using it.
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. How about there's a slow time rune that now lets you cast it on a targeted spot up to 60 yards away? That sounds like it'd be a lot of fun to me, just to completely shut down some boss group.
Yeah, or a group of archers annoying you.
Yeah.
I wonder if I want to cast that on Zoltan Cool in the Ubers battle. Just here's one for you.
Yeah.
Here's one for you one time, asshole.
Yeah.
Let's watch you sit there and not move for 5 seconds.
The two of you during the entire fight just cast orbs on top of each other. That's the entire
You just
fight.
I mean, we didn't spend a lot of time on this podcast talking about items, but from the affixes that we've seen, it sounds like, they are getting their act together and finally starting to produce legendary items that you can make a build around. I'm just going to mention a couple of them, but because I had my Demon Hunter glasses on while I was reading it, and I saw that it's like there was one that strafe would cost no hatred. I'm not sure if you've looked into any strafe builds for Demon Hunters, but it always revolves entirely around getting you enough hatred that you can keep using strafe because it drains your hatred pool really quickly. Like you have to use the vengeance passive, you have to use the bat pet, but I mean, just taking away the hatred cost entirely opens up, I don't know, a huge realm of new possibilities, and that's really exciting to me.
and it pretty much doubled the damage of Strafe too. I mean, practically, it's a huge.
Yeah.
Strafe
Oh,
was
yeah.
like the most buffed Demon Hunter skill of all. It seemed like.
Yeah. So if you get a hold of that legendary, and there's probably some really exciting combinations you can come up with that are only possible with that legendary, which is great, which is what we've been asking for because, yeah, the runes are cool, the skills are cool, but what made Diablo 2 so fantastic is when you combined, this build you like with the gear that could let you do things that you couldn't do before. That's what gave the game replayability for me, at least.
There was actually one of them that was on the last podcast, which was kind of a debate as well for it. It was the activates all runes, and a lot of people thought it meant that you use all 5 runes at the same time. But I think that was more of it's an alt rune or an alt item or whatever that
Yeah.
you would get. And I'm sure it might have even be something that drops at a high level, but it only has say a level 1 requirement. So it would be awesome because then because that was always kind of a thing that I hated about, especially in hardcore, like leveling a character, you always go on that same, the progression line of getting your skills and abilities. And
Right.
that's what I liked about the old, which I kind of in a way was hoping that they figured out some way of doing the runestones and bring them back as drops so that as you leveled up, you actually got to choose which socket of which rune that you wanted as you were leveling up. So kind of a way, instead of them choosing the abilities for you, you said, oh, I want, I got zombie charger and the first rune socket that I can get, I'm putting, zombie bears in it or whatever. If they change something else that it was like, you can pick the one that you want. And that's what that one affects, that's what I think it does is it just unlocks them so that you can, maybe even when you first get the ability, you can get every single rune is available for every single skill when you unlock them, which would be interesting.
Yes, you could have 3 different forms of whirlwind at the same time or something like
No,
that.
no, it's not even. No, it's more that you just have.
Well, that's what it does, so therefore you're wrong. It says enable all runes for a specific skill.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean if it enables them all early or late or lets you do more than one of them at a time. People are debating what that means.
Yeah.
I
So
hope that means you cast one meteor and all of the meteors fall from the sky because that would
That
be
would be
amazing.
ridiculous. Some of them though
that
conflict though on them.
that might be a little bit overpowered, I
Nope.
think. Is it 5 times the mana cost at the same time?
Yeah, you have to stack max arcane power just to use it.
And now
Um,
you cast when you cast time bubbles, you cast a bubble on the guy, but you also cast 4 of them on yourself.
So if you have all 5 forms of strafe at once, you're just like the biggest machine gun in the history of the world. You're putting out 6 different kinds of bullets all at once in all different
And
directions.
dropping grenades on everything.
And unfortunately, it costs 117 hatred per second. So enjoy it while it
yeah.
lasts.
There was one other thing I wanted to mention. Trend that we saw throughout each of the classes is that for a lot of skills, they just took the rune that was wildly popular and everyone used and baked it into the base ability of that skill. We saw several examples of that, and I'm glad they did that because yeah, it's when there's one ability, like specifically the monk making the Fist of Thunder always teleport you, um, or the demon hunter, the what was it called, the cluster arrow,
Evasive Fire also did that.
or yeah, evasive,
They all do the backflip and triple shot now.
yeah, and evasive arrow made it so that it dropped the hatred cost by 10 just permanently. It used to be you had to take the grenadier passive to do that, but I'm glad to see them doing stuff like that because they're sort of recognizing that okay, we made this one rune, far superior to all the other runes, so let's just make it so people don't have to choose, and hopefully, if they keep doing that, that'll open up more build possibilities as well for
Yeah,
the
and that would be like
with
zombie bears, or whatever how it is, how it casts. Like it goes from all of them are basically a single target to all of a sudden zombie bears cast three of them out of the middle of nowhere that, they all do they also do the most
Yeah,
amount of
and it does
damage.
10 times the
Yeah.
damage.
yeah,
And it's kind
that's
of like that it's just those kind of things, and that's why I'm it definitely going through and taking those unused runes and it's not necessarily because everyone was always saying take the unused runes and buff them up to the one that it was, but like you're saying, taking the most used rune and what was the best thing about it and just give it to every rune. So now
yeah,
you're actually making, because that was a lot of them, like a lot of those abilities were always like, even like Warcry into the fray, or no, was it Warcry or was it Battle Shout or Battle Cry, whatever it was. It's like, well, of course I'm always going to use the one that gives me, Fury on crit. But if they basically made it so that it always gave you Fury on crit, for all of them, even though they took it away, but then people would actually
right.
start choosing the different flavor of the one that did it. It's like having those one single abilities that are grossly overpowered.
So last thing, speaking of, we have the whole loot. The auction house is closing in March, and what are you guys thinking for a release date? I mean, has that influenced your opinion? And you're thinking we're going to see Reaper of Secret Souls coming up pretty soon, or are you still sticking to later dates?
I mean, I said back, I think the first podcast you had me on, I was saying about a June-ish, Mayish June timeframe, which kind of put it at like a 2-year anniversary. And that, I mean, you look at how they do. I would almost think that I mean, now that they specifically put that hard date on it, I mean, that's a pretty big thing for Blizzard to put dates. They don't move dates, so that's going to be the date that it is. And I would think Loot 2.0 comes at that point, and then
At
the
least, yeah,
yeah, and then or at least even comes slightly before it or something like that, so
right.
people can kind of phase out of it.
I think that they can't get rid of the auction house without Loot 2.0 without sort of breaking the game. So that yeah, I agree. At least Loot 2.0 has to be out by then, and I don't
Yeah.
think the expansion will be, but
Basically, by them saying they were turning off the auction house in 6 months was like, hey guys, sit back, relax, just chill out, play the game how you want to play it because everything's not going to matter when this expansion comes out, kind of thing. Like, no matter what you're doing, everything is getting reset, basically.
yeah, no,
So,
I agree. I've seen so many people saying, "Oh, this is what you should do," or "That's what you should do to prepare." And really, if there's going to be a ladder, and everyone's going to want to play the ladder, then there's no point in,
yeah.
having 500 demonic essences and having, all these perfect gems in preparation for currency or whatever. There's
You,
everything's going to start over fresh, which is why everyone loves the ladder so much. So,
Yeah, even the pre-Paragon farmings, like there's that Moldron guy. He went through and he did a calculations for it, but I actually did my own. It's even worse, I think, than at least my way that I did it. Where like I think if you have, it's like one character is 100, two is 120, like three gets to like 135. Basically, like five Paragon 100s gets you 150, and then after that, the next five give you only 10 levels. So like the highest you can get is 160. So all these people who are trying to get like grind through 10 Paragon 100 characters, they're going to have an extra like 5 stat points over you, or something like that.
yeah,
So, and even then at level
that's
70, who knows, you're going to get twice as much experience per hour. So all the hours that they've spent doing that, you'll be able to do it in maybe like half to, who knows, quarter of the time or something as well. So to me, I think removing the auction house, that is pretty much the biggest incentive for anyone to join the ladder because you're going to have already the current economy of trillions of gold and everything else and all these items, and it's like it's just this
yeah.
hodgepodge of like the bastard child of everything that was bad about the game, and I think people are going to try and go away from that.
And as you guys pointed out a number of times, these are all very preliminary, early, way pre-alpha even. So, You know, everything we said is probably going to be wrong in 3 months, which is about a month sooner than usual.
It's probably already wrong. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, probably it's an old ass build that people get dug into. So thanks for listening. This is the Diablo podcast. We are online at diablowinggamers.com and moo.
Moo.
Moo,
Moo.
Moo.
moo,
Moo.
moo,
Moo.
moo,
Moo.
moo.